being 6 o'clock, is this working?
Yep.
It being 6 o'clock, I'm calling to order the Select Board meeting of May 19th, 2025. If you would all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And just so everyone knows, this meeting is being telecast live by Chelmsford Telemedia and being recorded for later viewing by the public. And we do have an announcement from Chelmsford Telemedia here. They would like viewers to know if you're viewing live on YouTube, please note that we're experiencing slight audio sync issues. For better viewing, go to chelmsfordtv.org, click on Live TV, then click on Municipal Channel and watch that stream, which is a mirror of the cable broadcast. CTM is working to solve the problem. And you'll notice that we have an empty seat here. We do have one member on Zoom. Pat Maloney is on Zoom tonight. And next up, we have public service announcements. He'll read for us.
Thanks, Aaron.
Hi,
So
Pat.
we'll start with the Memorial Day observance 2025, which is Monday, May 26th. Chelmsford will observe Memorial Day on Monday, May 26, 2025 in the Chelmsford Town Center. The Merrimack Valley Vietnam Veterans will be the host veterans organization this year. The parade will end on the Town Center Common, followed by a short Memorial Day program. The parade route will start at 10 a.m. from the parking lot next to CVS and Max and Leo's on Route 4. They will proceed to the lights at the intersection of Route 129, continue by the Chelmsford Center for the Arts, and take a left onto Academy Street, and then another left onto the backside of the Common. This is a wonderful opportunity for scouts and other civic groups to join them. Everyone is welcome. All veterans are invited to march with the Merrimack Valley Vietnam Veterans. If you have any questions about the parade, please call the Veterans Office at 978-250-5238. And we have a proclamation in recognition of Memorial Day on May 26, 2025. Whereas Memorial Day, May 26, 2025, has been set aside as the annual day of remembrance for those men and women who served our nation during times of conflict as members of the armed forces. And whereas we pause this day to especially remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice of their lives to defend the freedom of all Americans. And whereas we honor the service and sacrifice of all veterans of all wars and conflicts, and join the living veterans of the town of Chelmsford in expressing our gratitude to their fallen comrades. Now, therefore, we, the Chelmsford Select Board, do hereby proclaim Monday, May 26, 2025, as Memorial Day 2025, and join all residents of the town in recognizing the deceased veterans of Chelmsford on this solemn day. Signed this day, 19th day of May 2025. The Chelmsford Market on the Common is announcing their 2025 season. The Market on the Common will be every Saturday from May 31st to October 11th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And in memory of firefighter Richard St. Onge, Westford remembers, and Chelmsford and Westford firefighters invite you to join them for a special dedication ceremony honoring firefighter Richard St. Onge, whose courage and devotion to service embody the spirit of brotherhood and sacrifice. Firefighters from Chelmsford and Westford will unveil a new permanent memorial sculpture in his honor. Together, they will share memories, reflect on his life, and stand united as one community to honor his legacy. That will be on June 1st, 2025 at 10 a.m. at the Chelmsford Community Garden at Sunny Meadow Farm. That is at 168 Robin Hill Road, Chelmsford, Massachusetts. And the final notice this evening is from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Central Massachusetts Mosquito Control Project. Central Massachusetts Mosquito Control Project personnel will be in our community to respond to residents' concerns about mosquitoes in their area on the following dates in June. June 4th, June 10th, June 16th, June 23rd, and June 26th. Any of the above dates are tentative, and all dates are subject to change due to weather conditions, mosquito populations, mosquito virus activity, and/or special event spraying. This program will shut down when cool nighttime temperatures become predominant in the area. A detailed notice about the spray schedule is posted on the CMMCP phone system after 3:30 p.m. each day and is also listed on the website at www.cmmcp.org. Click the 2025 spray schedule button on the right. And that's what we have for this evening.
Thanks, Pat. Next up, we have general public input.
There's nobody on Zoom and there's nobody in the room.
Thank you.
No public.
Next, we have committee vacancies.
And for committee vacancies this week, as of May 19th, 2025, Agricultural Commission has one unexpired 3-year term ending June 30th, 2026. Commission on Disabilities has one unexpired 3-year term ended on June 30th, 2025, one unexpired 3-year term ending June 30th, 2026, and two 3-year terms ending on June 30th, 2027. The Council on Aging Board has one unexpired 3-year term ending on June 30th, 2025. The Conservation Commission has one unexpired 3-year term ending on June 30th, 2025. Historic District Commission alternate member has one 3-year term ending on June 30th, 2027. The Holiday Decorating Committee has two unexpired 1-year terms ending on December 31st, 2025. The Parade Committee has all applicants welcome to 1-year terms ending on July 31st, 2025. And the Recycling Committee has one unexpired 3-year term ending on June 30th, 2026. If you're interested in serving on a town board or committee, please complete an online application available on the town website. For more information, please contact the town manager's office at 250-5202 or tmoffice@chelmsfordmass.gov.
Thank you, Pat. And next on the agenda, we have signing the warrant for the June 23rd, 2025 special town meeting.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, I have before you this evening for your vote of approval and signature the warrant for a special town meeting on June 23rd, 2025. It's a 5-article warrant. The primary purpose of calling the meeting is Article 1, which is for the partial replacement of the Southborough Elementary School roof. The other articles are Article 2, which is supplemental funding for the high school, Westland School, and McCarthy Middle School elevator projects. Article 3 is a community preservation funding request for a perimeter survey of the 4 parcels of land commonly known as Coolest Farm, which is part of the baseline survey. Article 4 is a placeholder article to fund collective bargaining agreements, and we anticipate we will be bringing forth an article for the library employees union. And then Article 5 is a article for the town meeting to approve regulations by the Board of Cemetery Commissioners for private family mausoleums at all public burial grounds, which is required under the statutes of state law, Chapter 114, Section 23. So that's the warrant before you this evening. It has undergone legal review by town council, and upon your signature this evening, we'll present it to the town clerk's office, who will then hand it over to the constable for public posting, and then the finance committee is scheduled to meet a week from this Thursday to review the 5 articles, and then on June 2nd, your next regular meeting, you'll be presented with the presentations for your recommendations on the June 23rd town meeting. The reason it's that soon is because since it's a special town meeting, the finance committee report has to be out 14 days as opposed to the 7 days for an annual town meeting.
Okay. And I think we do have to take a vote.
Yes, a
right,
motion to
sign
approve
this.
and sign the warrant as presented.
So, does anyone have any questions or comments? No? I'll take a motion then.
Okay, motion to approve the special town meeting on the 23rd day of June at 7:30 PM in the meeting as presented.
I second that.
I think you have a motion and a second, and we'll do a roll call vote. Pat Wojcik?
Yes.
Pat Maloney?
Aye.
Jeff?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
And I'm an aye. The motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have the electricity aggregation procurement program options. So this is the conversation that we had last week, or at our last meeting, about selecting the default option for the green energy.
Yeah, and the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee met met last week following your meeting. I did exchange text messages with Badri and told him the board would be discussing this around 6:15, so here's where we are. I asked him if the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee had any further information from its meeting last week. He wrote back, no further information. He thinks the best answers to get is for the select board to authorize the default greener option, and then the parties, meaning myself, the sustainability manager, and the committee would work to get the best renewable percentage for the cost for the community. So again, it's just, I guess not much different than when we left last Monday, other than you've had a week to reflect upon it.
And we just need to vote
and
on-
receive comment from the community, yeah.
And once we vote on what the
Yeah,
default will be tonight,
Yeah,
then we can
we're scheduled to go out on June 17th to hit the market. So again, it's been pushed back a little bit because, of the additional consideration. So even if tonight you're not comfortable, June 2nd, is another time that you'll be meeting that would allow, some further input to the procurement process. But I think the question is it the lowest cost option, the default, which has been the traditional, or do we use the default as the greener option with people could then elect to go either lower cost or higher, greener renewable components?
Okay.
So, I agree with what you said. The clean energy recommendation was that we give the town manager and whoever else is doing that negotiation the authority to obviously get the lowest price, but with the expectation that the greener would be the default. It looks like what these numbers show that the bidders seem to be able to come pretty darn close to what the basic is right now with the greener. And everybody still has the option to go down to the lower option, the basic, if they choose to do that. And as we know, there will be outreach to the community to show them how to do that and make it as easy as possible. So that's my recommendation.
Does anyone
I
else
have a
any-
question. Paul, I had asked last week about mailings. I'm fine with going with the greener option, but is there, and to Pat's point, she just mentioned that there would be some communication with the town. Is there a mailing that
Yes.
would go out to explain to the residents how to opt down or up as they choose?
Yes.
After that?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, there would be it's required, actually, under the program. We're required to do a mailing. Given that this is in November, it would probably go out just after Labor Day so that people have enough notice and time. And if they have questions, the letter instructs them who to contact for further information. And as you noted in your question, here's how you can elect to choose a greener, product or a less costly one, which is more aligned with the default product. So yes, there will be a letter that goes out in a town letterhead and town, so that people know it's not just junk, another piece of junk mail that they get. So yes, there is a letter that goes out. We'll also post notice on our website. We'll also make announcements at this table and try to get the word out to folks. And we'll put it in the newsletter and everything else to let people know that change is coming, because no matter what's going to happen, something's going to change, whether it's the price and or, obviously the mix of the power. So yes.
Okay, I would be comfortable endorsing this if there is such a letter that explains it very clearly to the residents what their options are. And with that, I'm good. Thank you.
So I actually agree a lot with what Pat had said about going with the greener option. I do want to acknowledge, though, that I I've heard from a handful of people that kind of felt both ways on this. I won't say that it was one more than the other. I am very cognizant about asking for people in today's environment to pay more. I think under the presentation data points we saw last week that at the end of the day, they can craft the greener option that will be similar to price to what we're paying today. So we're not asking people to pay more. It may have sounded like that, so I just wanted to clarify that that's kind of the goal. And under their worst case scenarios, they were talking of, $5 a month, and I don't want to minimize even $5 a month for folks, but people are concerned that the country's going in a different direction with green, and other people are very concerned we're not going fast enough towards green. And just to acknowledge both of those things, I can support this at the greener option because we're not asking people for more money. And if we're very, very clear, to Pat's point, on how to opt down, you can opt out of green or you can opt down to a cheaper price. As long as that's clearly communicated, which I think in the past it has been, then I would support the middle greener option at similar rates to what we pay today.
And I don't know if part of our motion is going to be how long the contract should be. I would encourage the longer the better, because I don't think the prices are going to go down, and it looks like if we go for a longer contract, we get a lower price also.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's
Okay.
another benefit.
We'll pursue 3 years. Historically, it had been 3 years, but the last contract was 2 years because the market was more volatile coming out of the pandemic and so forth. But I would tend to agree that I think, given that you're not going to see an administration change and anything else in the next 3 years, it's probably better to go with a 3-year certainty because, as you know, historically prices have gone up.
Jeff, any thoughts?
I agree with pretty much what everybody said to this point, because I think, to Aaron's point, that the greener option with the futures looking the way they are going to be the most sensible. And plus, people have the option to get out of it if they don't agree with what we're doing, and that's fine. But I think we should go with the greener option.
So I personally, I'm kind of in the same boat that I was when we had this conversation 2 years ago, where in theory, I like the idea of defaulting into the greener option, but I, in principle, I have a really hard time defaulting people into a more expensive electric bill. And I think even with all the communication in the world, you have people who pay their bills online these days and don't read what they get in the mail and don't read the flyers, and you have elderly people who don't want to navigate the flyers and have to make phone calls and have to switch their electricity over, and they get confused, and I am still kind of on the fence, but I lean probably towards staying in the default, least expensive option as the default, but yeah, to each their own. But we can, I think we can vote tonight if you guys, I think you sound like you're all ready, so.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure, yeah, of course.
Paul, so based on that communication and knowing that, I mean, if we lock in for 3 years or if we vote this for 3 years, is that rate locked in for 3 years or is that subject to change in a year or so, or?
No, it's locked in. It's locked in, and unless there was a mandated exemption, in other words, a change of law in other words, that was passed on by the government that mandated an increase in electricity costs, then we would have to absorb that. But from that, no, it's a fixed rate for 3 years, known rate for 3 years. Yep.
Okay.
When we go out to bid, do they give us rates for each option depending how long we lock in for? Like when we go out to bid, will they give us back rates if we lock in for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years?
Yes, that'll be part of the procurement.
So then we'll be able to see what the difference is. So then we can actually decide at that time whether
But no,
we
you
lock
won't
in
decide
for.
because I got to decide.
Okay.
I got to decide in like 2 hours.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
because it's a market.
So we actually have to decide tonight also how many years we're locking in for.
Well, what I'm hearing from the board is a 3-year preference, barring
Yeah.
the unforeseen, which is always the case. Yeah. So in other words,
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul has the judgment that if it comes out that the third year they're going to jack it up, that not to do that, to to do it just for two.
Yeah, if you
So
had
I
this.
think we have to give him some,
Yeah, so you can
Yeah,
decide. at
no,
the
we've
last
done that,
minute, yeah.
barring the
That's
unforeseen,
fine.
like, it's no different than if you have flukes in interest rates and you see that a 10-year note's better, worse than a 5-year note, you would do a 5-year, so it'd be the same thing. We'll, I understand the board's direction. Yeah.
So Aaron, I got one last question.
Hmm.
If somebody decides to go to the greener option, then decides in a year from now they want to go back down.
They can change.
Still do
Yeah.
that.
Yep, yep, you can move.
So do we take one vote?
You need a motion, yeah.
Is it
yeah.
one
Yeah,
vote for
yeah,
the
yeah.
default and one vote to authorize?
No,
You
no,
have one vote?
There's one
Okay.
vote to authorize the manager to proceed with the electricity aggregation procurement,
Okay.
and with the greener as the, what I'm understanding is the greener as the default product at approximately the same price as the current rate for the aggregation program, and with the preference for a 3-year option. That's kind of how I understand the direction from the board.
And you just need a majority?
Yeah,
So
yep,
I can still,
yep.
okay. If nobody has anything else, I'll take a motion if you'd like to. Pat.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the town manager to enter into negotiations to for the municipal electricity aggregation for a period of 3 years, with the greener middle option being the preferred option by the board.
Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
Oh, we have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote because we have a participant on Zoom. Pat Wojcik,
yes.
Pat Maloney,
Aye.
and Jeff,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
and I am a nay. So we're going to, the motion passes with 4 in favor and 1 opposed. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda, we have the town council appointment for FY26. Pat, do you want to speak to this? Pat reached out to town council to confirm that they would like to continue to serve the town for another year. And we do have a letter from them confirming that. Or do you want to read it?
I mean,
can just read it.
that's basically it, yeah, I mean, that's all, that's what the next step was, just to get that confirmation.
Yep. So KP Law says, Pat, thank you for this wonderful news. Joe and I, on behalf of the firm, are thrilled to be reappointed and will gladly continue to serve the town as town council. We consider it a great honor to represent the town as town council. Should you need any additional information from Joe or me, please let us know. Looking forward to working with you, the rest of the board, and the town manager in the upcoming fiscal year. So with that, from what I understand, at our next meeting, we'll make the formal appointment?
Yeah, we'll have annual appointments in June, it may be the 16th, because there's 3 meetings in June this year, and we're just getting out the notices now for all the annual appointments, but
Okay.
yes, it'll be on your list in June.
Sounds good. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a select board policy. We have the town manager appointment process. And I think we went over this at the last meeting. I don't know if anyone has any other
Yeah,
comments.
nobody got in touch with me about any edits or anything, so I don't know if anybody has anything else they want to, discuss now. We still have an opportunity.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think last week, in principle, I was fine with it too. I just went over some of the wording. I didn't send it to you because I didn't think it was something that was critical to change, but I just wanted to make sure I understood the idea of it says the select board shall decide if a search firm should be employed by the screening committee. So at that point, and then we direct the search committee on how to choose the firm. But is at that point that this appointed search committee will be handling everything directly with the search firm and sourcing all the resumes, or is that?
Usually the screening committee is the one that does, reviews gets the first look at all the resumes that come in and narrow that, does the initial, I guess you could say, scaling out the ones that don't meet and then the ones that do, prioritizing.
And those meetings are done in closed session to
Right.
protect the identity of those who apply. And then when it's turned over to the select board, whether it's 3 or 5 candidates, then that becomes public.
Right.
And then that's when the select board acts. So that's how the process works. That way, you're encouraging people to apply, and obviously they don't want to jeopardize or take a risk if they're not going to be a finalist. So
No.
so basically, as you noted, the select board would decide whether the town's going to utilize a search committee, search firm to assist the screening committee or not. And then once that's decided, then the ad goes out and everything else, and then people apply.
And then just based on how this was done in the past, right, it says that, at least one, no more than 2 select board members, representative from the town, and then some town residents. Is that how it was done in the
Well,
past too?
we've only actually had done
Once.
one time. And that, it was done very quickly because the incumbent town manager left with very little notice. I mean, and it was agreeable between the town,
Yep.
between the select board and that town manager. So they put together very quickly a screening committee that was composed of 4 select board members and 5 members of the community, which seemed to be heavily weighted on the select board side. So it's typically not that many on select board members on the screening committee. Just because, one reason being, because I guess you want a little bit more of the input from the community, and the select board, all 5 members get the final say no matter what anyway. I mean, if you're gonna put all of them on the screening committee, what's the point in, coming back to the select board with your finalists, you know what I mean? That's kind of my logic on it.
And I can see that. I think that makes sense. I think just, for me, I never had a whole lot of personal faith in HR screening resumes, so I understand we have to have a search committee to do that, and I certainly don't want to screen 100 resumes, but getting down to, the choice of 3 to 5, if I was not to be one of the members on the committee, I would just feel a little out of the loop on that, but
Well-
I can agree with the logic of why we wouldn't all be on that.
Okay, but being a member of the select board, and you can correct me if, on this, would other select board not screening committee members be able to go to those executive sessions when they were doing the screening of the resumes?
Yeah, I don't think it
Okay.
would violate anything, yeah.
Right, so you can observe, and then you can always pull members of the screening committee aside and say, I wish you would do this instead of that.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, if I wasn't a part of the committee, I don't know if I'd want to necessarily,
If you had
it's a-
strong opinions, you might.
It's a bit, it's critical for the town's future if and when we have to, when we have to address this type of thing. So, I like to have more information, not less, like to be a participant,
Sure.
not
Yeah,
on the sideline. So, but again, otherwise, I think it lays things out pretty clearly, and I wouldn't edit any of these things, they were just more clarifying for me.
okay.
So are you volunteering for the committee now already?
We don't know. Maybe
Just keep that in mind,
Right, it is.
in like a few years, maybe. Okay.
So we have to vote on this if there's nothing else that anybody has any issues with.
No. I'll take a motion then, Pat, if you're up to it.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the draft of the town manager appointment process and policies as presented.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote. Pat Wojcik,
Yes,
Pat Maloney,
Aye.
Jeff,
Yes.
Aaron.
Yes.
And I am also an aye. So the motion passes. 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you, Pat, for putting that together.
Yep.
And next
Thank
up,
you,
we have a status report on the FY25 Select Board and Town Manager goals.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the board, the purpose of tonight's meeting is 1 week after last week's session and following town meeting is for the board to look to the future. What does it want to accomplish in the next, year until the town election and so forth, upcoming fiscal year? What we have here is what the board did a year ago, and per that, under the town's policies, I provide a quarterly update. So this is the 4th quarter update on what was done a year ago, and I'm not going to go through it extensively because, one, you've had it, many of you have heard it before, and second of all, really the only purpose to go through it is just to prod members and saying, is that something we want to continue in the future? So I'll go through it quickly, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to slow me down or stop. The first goal from a year ago for the current fiscal year was early notification of financial issues, obviously the budget and the fiscal condition being paramount. Obviously, we're now at a more elevated state of that, given what's gone on with the economy and, and what's happening with the federal funding situation and so forth. And so, and as you can see, I did that in the past year. We talked, and we will continue to hear again. You'll see these themes about what's going on with the retirement system assessment, health insurance premiums, utility costs, and we'll have a 5-year financial forecast at fall town meeting. We'll have a tri-board meeting in December, and probably before any of those things, I'll probably do another 3-year outlook, which was helpful a year ago to sort of, continue to ring the bell and draw attention to where we're looking at, particularly now that where the legislature's moving on the budget for the state, which is our local aid, and also we will, if things go right, by next month we should have 4 of our 6 collective bargaining agreements in place for the upcoming 3 fiscal years. Next one was fee structure. Obviously, looking at fees, and we'll continue to do that. Financial management and visibility, exploring grant opportunities. Obviously, we'll continue to do that. I noted all the grants that we received because it is noteworthy and notable, all of the items that we receive funding for. And again, they go through that. And then obviously the legislative funding opportunities, the earmarks. And once again, we have earmarks submitted that are in the House and Senate versions of the budget. We'll see how they come out with the budget adopted probably in July. And then hopefully they'll remain with whatever actions the state is taking once the year begins. Because, for example, we've seen the warnings coming from the state, including the governor announcing a hiring freeze for basically non-essential public safety positions effective, in the next couple of weeks. And then obviously we're watching what happens in Washington, which money comes to the state and then the towns. Fiscal management and visibility. A year ago, the goals for the current fiscal year was to look at the marijuana question as a revenue source. The board opted to place a question on the ballot to whether the town should join many of our neighboring communities for a 3% excise fee, and that vote failed by a 34.5% to 58.33% margin. Also, collective bargaining, as I mentioned, we continue our negotiations. As I mentioned earlier, we have a tentative agreement with the library employee unions, which we'll talk about in the closed session this evening. That just would leave the firefighters and public safety dispatches remaining. ARPA funding, that was all allocated in time for the December 31st, 2024 deadline. Christine Clancy will be in probably next month with an updated report. We were doing monthly reports, but that was more because we wanted to be sure we allocated the funding and we're managing it. Now she's going to give periodic reports when there's substantive conditions to report, but we're still working on it. Anyway, manage ongoing projects. Again, that was part of the ARPA. Process improvements, the gap analysis, that's continuing with the consultant. So again, we may see something in the next month or two in terms of the assessment. Sewer stormwater drainage. Again, we're continuing the inflow reduction work by Public Works, including the reserve capacity. The MWRA options long-term report in terms of the ability to connect to the MWRA sewer in Bedford or Burlington. We should see that report in July, as noted. Regional, again, we're still communicating, but there's really no promise for regional cooperation on the sewer capacity issue. Again, the infiltration, DPW continues to explore infiltration sources that are adding to our flow, and then they're continuing the infrastructure maintenance, most notably the sewer force main along Progress Avenue. Infrastructure, roads and sidewalks, obviously that work is now commencing with the construction season, and then we anticipate that continuing, and then we'll look when we close out this fiscal year to see if we can put more money into infrastructure, because we will, as we noted at town meeting and here, we will finish the year in the black, and we will have some cash to put towards infrastructure, particularly roads. Underground utilities, as you know, town meeting approved the appropriation from the Community Preservation Fund. I have a call with council next week to meet with, virtually we'll do it, with Verizon and National Grid to get that design process underway. Town government focus areas, 54 Richardson Road, as you know, that's ongoing. We'll have an executive session tonight about that, dealing with the PFAS regulations and contamination. The Warren Pole conservation restriction, that is, we're awaiting feedback from the Massachusetts Division of Conservation Services regarding the restriction that the town submitted. Traffic issues, Traffic Safety Committee meets. In fact, we met this morning. And we're continuing, and we'll report back to the board when there's particular regulations that the board needs to approve, like we did with the stop sign with the bridge project, or if there's issues that arise. As you can imagine, we've had some feedback with the new crosswalk and speed tables on Mill Road. Anytime you make a change, you get feedback. That should be fully operational with the flashing lights later this week, and which is good because now it's starting to gear up with the soccer and the season. So again, we'll continue to update the board. And then the Central Square project, we opted not to pursue the acquisition of the parcel in Central Square because of the liability issues from the groundwater contamination. Town government focus areas of tree planting, that is underway. The DPW is out there literally this week and was doing some last week, planting trees in the community at the dog park. And they'll be planting soon at the school by Harrington and the high school. Consolidated regional services, we continue to do that as noted. We're now the lead community for the seal of weights and measures with Tewksbury and Westford, and also in the earlier slide we're the lead for the grant with Bill Ricker for the energy conservation services. Strategic plan. That's been completed. Again, a copy of that is in this document, and again, we're not going to go through that page by page, but we're working to implement, and we have a meeting this Thursday with department heads to discuss implementation of the strategic plan. Board and committee initiatives, the Fire Station Study Committee is moving forward. As you know, we've hired a designer and a project manager with the board's approval, so that's moving. Open space recreation, that plan has been updated. We're looking, town meeting funded accessible improvements on open space lands. There's also some grant opportunities potentially out there. Clean energy and sustainability, as I mentioned a moment ago, we did secure a $240,000 grant from Mass Save to fund a regional energy advocate, with the town of Chelmsford serving as the lead with the town of Barica as part of the grant. Again, sometimes you get more grant money if you do regional projects. MBTA zoning, as you know, the town approved that. And the Trammell Crow at 255 Princeton Street, they are now going to be in the next few days receiving their occupancy permit as well as beginning rental showings. So basically means the road's going to be open and you're going to hear people at that site. The good news for the town is that the townhouses at the entrance and one of the main buildings, as well as the sewer treatment plant, are operational, and so that will affect the town's growth for property valuation because that deadline is June 30th. And then we'll have partial on the remaining buildings, which are scheduled to be completed this fall. And then the housing plan, production plan update, as NIMCOG is just in the final touches with the committee on that project. ADAs, housing, with the adoption of the new accessory dwelling unit zoning bylaw on February 2nd, the planning board obtained town meeting approval, and we're now awaiting the decision from the Attorney General's office, which should be here by the end of next month, because it was 90 days and they asked for a 45-day extension. The 40B Safe Haven, the Community Development Director submitted the affordable housing approvals for Morose Avenue and 255 Princeton Street to obtain the 10%, which is the 1,470 units, subsidized housing inventory. As the board knows, I sent information that came in today. The Board of Appeals met on May last week, 2 weeks ago, the beginning of May, and asserted safe harbor that we were at 10%. That letter went out today in accordance with the deadlines. So now because the property applicant appealed, this is on Crosby Village off of North Road by Crosby Lane. And so that notice has gone out. Now the applicant will have 30 days, or the town, depending upon the decision by the Executive Office of Housing Livable Communities regarding the 10% safe harbor. And then this afternoon, about 3 hours ago, the 40B application was submitted for 243 Riverneck Road, which is the residence at Riverneck, and the project there is 16 rental units and 7 townhouse units at 243 Riverneck Road, which is the Crandall property. The applicant is Ashok Patel. Many people may know this from decades ago. This has been a site under 40B considerations for the I think for the last 2 decades, it's an environmentally sensitive site. There's also some concerns that were noted in the town's comment letter about the grades and so forth. And so I anticipate the same process will happen, that the Board of Appeals has to schedule a hearing within 30 days. They'll open the hearing, and then they may elect, logic would dictate that since they just asserted it for the Crosby Village one, that they may take a similar action for 243 Riverneck. And my understanding is the applicant is aware of what's happening for 243 Riverneck, is aware of what's happening at Crosby Village. So again, that's where we are on the 40B Safe Haven. MSBA school project, as Pat has updated the board as the chair of the Parker School building project, we're at the feasibility stage, and we've obtained the board's approval to hire the owner's project manager, and we're now submitting the documents for the design services, which will probably take place towards the end of the summer, so that we can get going in the fall on the the exploration of options for that project. And also, we've submitted the documents for the MSBA Accelerated Repair Program for the Southborough Elementary School, which is the reason we're having the special town meeting to fund that project, because we did not have that information available at the spring annual town meeting. The 250th USA birthday celebration, we were not funded in the first round, which were the events that took place recently at Lexington and Concord. We anticipate there'll be another funding round for the 2026 celebration of 250-year anniversary. The word's not coming to me. I know it's not it's
Independence Day?
yeah of the Declaration of Independence. Yeah. So that's what's coming up there, and we'll look at that. And then the Senior Center inclusiveness, again, we reported on that back in February. We're continuing to work with the Senior Center to open up to different cultures and outreach. Volunteer appreciation, as we know, we held a Volunteer Appreciation Day at the Volunteer Fair back in March. Policy updates, you approved the town council appointment policy at your March 10th meeting. And then you appointed this evening the town manager process timeline policy. Charter updates, this is sort of the one thing that's left outstanding, is the board had looked about whether we should be removing some committees that are no longer active, like the celebrations committee, which is called for in the charter. It's really something you could do for fall town meeting, because if you want to amend the charter, you have to bring it to fall town meeting and then vote it in the spring by ballot approval. That's how you'd submit the approval for the ballot change. And that concludes the goals update report for the current fiscal year.
Thank you, Paul. Next up, we have to establish select board and town manager FY26 goals. And it looks like we have some proposed.
Yeah, I've given you some
priorities
proposed,
here.
which is why my initials are on it, so it's nobody's other than, meaning, everybody contributes, and I don't, but just like I went over the goals report, and I've included the strategic plan in the document, which we're not going to go through by line, but I sort of advanced what I thought would get the ball going on this discussion. We do have an easel and marker boards if the board wants to utilize that, but to start it out, what I reflected upon this, and I've shared this with the chair and vice chair, when looking at sort of what's ahead of us in the year ahead and what's most that we can see and what's most to the community, obviously the major investment in infrastructure in the community is the feasibility study for the new Parker School. I think that, that really has to remain a focus of the community, because you don't want to get to a case, or you want to minimize the extent possible that people saying, gee, we weren't aware of that the town was looking for a new school project when the vote comes in a couple of years. And also you want the community's input in terms of what grades should be in that school, whether it should be renovation or replacement, and again, the educational value and benefits and opportunities with the new building. So again, working with the owner's project manager and then ultimately the designer that's selected to explore these alternative grade configurations and associated cost estimates. I'll just go through these and then you can go over for discussion. Next one was sewer capacity resolution. As I mentioned earlier, we'll receive the report in July regarding the the cost to connect to the MWRA sewer system in Burlington or Bedford via the installation of a sewer main along Route 3A, which basically would go from the town's business corridor on Billerica Road down basically what we towards Burlington that way off of 3A, and consider what that would mean in terms of cost as well as what it would provide for economic development. Ledge Road commercial trucks, as you know, that's an ongoing issue. That's going back to the Board of Appeals at their first meeting, the first Thursday in June, which I believe is the 5th, for I think will be a resolution. The Board of Appeals stayed action on it to allow the town officials to meet with representatives of Newport Aggregate as well as other property owners owning the quarries in that area. After a series of meetings, we've been unable to come to a resolution. And so therefore, it's going to go back to the Board of Appeals. Council will be present. Obviously, the Newport will be present. The Building Commission will be present. And we'll see where that goes. But there's likely to be appeals from either side, depending on what the Board of Appeals decides to do. But obviously, that's an important issue and has been. Budgetary, again, is a predominant issue. We have a budget in place, just like the state does, but we don't know what's ultimately going to happen. But we really have got to transition to doing what's coming up in FY27, because that process will start in October, at which time we could be amending the current year's budget. And then, as we talked about earlier, there'll be a tri-board meeting once in December, and then a budget release in early February. Part of that, as we know from our financial forecast, is we can't. It doesn't appear that we'll be able to maintain level service. So the question does become: do we explore revenue options? And that goes from everything. As you know, we talked marijuana earlier. We talked billboards. We talked whether we look at regional public safety dispatch, wireless communication tower sites that we talked about last meeting, perhaps at 54 Richardson Road or otherwise, and then again the addition of efficiencies. It's sort of one of the all-of-above approach. Do we look at possible modifications to solid waste and recycling collection, such as, do we still want to remain as one of the few communities, and certainly in this area, that collects from 4 or more unit condominium projects? Do we want to require property owners to remove snow from sidewalks? Do we want to investigate consolidation of water districts? None of these are popular, which is why they don't exist today, and they are controversial. But I think it's sort of like, well, if you don't like some of these options, then you may not like the alternatives, because they're going to become cuts, and quite frankly, the cuts are going to come and fall heavily in education, because that's where the money goes, as well as public works and so forth. And then finally, some what I would call secondary or other items. West and south fire stations, we talked earlier. We'll monitor the building committee's progress on the design, cost estimates, schematic design, and bidding for that project. And that certainly that wouldn't go out to bid till a year from now, or maybe earlier in this 9 or so months. But the board needs to keep an eye on that project, and we'll report regularly. Pat Maloney's the liaison to the permanent building committee to see how that project unfolds in what's a very turbulent and uncertain environment with tariffs and inflation and so forth. Strategic plan, mentioned earlier a couple times about monitoring the implementation of the newly adopted strategic plan. Open space land accessibility, we talked about that briefly, about increasing the accessibility on open space lands and pursuing grant and other funding opportunities. And then, again, another one from town meeting, as we mentioned a moment ago, underground utilities, monitoring the progress on the phase of the underground utilities through the town center. So that's sort of what I had as a starting point. But again, this is our meeting tonight. There's, it's almost like a work session. There's no audience. There's nobody on Zoom other than our Pat Maloney, our board member. And this purpose of tonight's meeting is to, figure out what does the board want to do. And then and where we get tonight, we can come back at a future meeting if necessary with a formal document and adoption in final form. But tonight's really a brainstorming and discussion of like, well, what does the board want to do in the next year, and what should we highlight? So I'll stop there.
So does anybody have anything they
Yeah,
want to?
Paul, I know we're waiting on the report from Weston and Sampson, but do you see any negative with us tying in with the sewer with these other communities?
I think it's going to be cost.
But we're kind of up against it right now,
Yeah,
right?
we're here, and it's also, it's not only cost, but it's also going to be what's the impact of the additional sewer capacity? Because if you add, I've had a preliminary discussion with the consultant along with the public works director. It's going to be costly, and part of the cost is what they envision is we would probably install a new sewer main from the Chelmsford line down to Bedford or Burlington connection MWRA sewer. And why we say, why would you tie a line? Don't they have lines in the road? Well, they do, but the problem is they don't have the capacity to take the flow from Chelmsford. And in some cases, what we're seeing in Burlington especially, they have their own capacity constraints. So therefore, it also keeps it cleaner. In other words, you also don't want to get people in those other communities anxious that they're going to have sewer problems or sewer backups or whatever because, oh, you tied Chelmsford in. I mean, you can imagine the angst if we said, oh, we're going to let Westford come through Chelmsford sewer lines. You know, people are like, oh, is that going to work? Is it going to be okay? So the thinking preliminarily, and again, I haven't seen it in a written form or final report, would be is you install a sewer main, you know, basically from 129, and you may also involve additional sewer main within our portion of 129. So therefore, because remember, everything else is going to Lowell, and because again, our pipes have certain capacity and Lowell has certain capacity, so we may install almost a second line, let's say in 129, and then what does that do for that flow? The also thing becomes, what does it cost? Because, you know, how do you get the return? What do you then charge people for that work? Because not only are you going to pay for the construction, the town's going to have to maintain that line going forward. So let's say we stall a line, it's not just, oh, what's it cost to put it in the ground? You then have an ongoing maintenance, just like we have an ongoing maintenance for our existing sewer lines. And then are those towns of Burlington, Bedford, and Billerica are going to ask for a privilege fee to go through their right-of-way to go through their town. So those are questions that the consultant's trying to get answers to be able to evaluate that. And then the question becomes, okay, then what does that mean? Right now, our zoning on 129 allows not only economic development, but part of that is also residential development. Because, you know, so therefore, it could have an impact on not only economic development opportunities, but residential development, which would then, what does that spill over into the town's infrastructure? Which as we know from town meeting, we can't discuss, you know, on a project what that is, but it's obviously going to be in the back of people's minds is, what would this mean if this were to result in additional housing development, and what's the impact on the town's infrastructure? You know, whether it's schools, whether it's traffic, whether it's whatever you have out there. So that's the discussion, Jeff. And I know it's a long-winded answer, but I just want you to understand it's a really complex question. And then the other thing is you got to have the water to support the sewer, because if you're increasing this flow, you then have to look at, well, what are your sources of water? Because as you know, they're regulated and monitored as well, but how much you can draw from the river basins and as we know in you know, water conservation times.
So in a
But I think
nutshell,
in addition to that, you know, we have to analyze and look at the cost of not doing something like that. Because I think if I heard you recently, Paul, we might be losing businesses on 129 because they wanted to expand and you know, couldn't get the sewer capacity that they needed, and also additional sewer capacity would draw in certain types of businesses if we had it to give out. So I think, you know, you need to analyze the cost of not doing something like that, along with the cost of doing something like that as well, because we can't afford to be losing business, and we need to be drawing business in, and you know, more residents. And right now, it's just tough to do that. And by my way of looking at things, it doesn't look like, unless there's a regional solution that the state gets behind to increase capacity or to do something with the wastewater treatment plant in Lowell, we'll be talking about this 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah, exactly. Right, that's the problem. There's an opportunity cost no matter which way you go. And that's the struggle that we're going to deal with.
So that's why we're getting this report.
Yep,
right,
we'll
to
get this
kind of-
report hopefully by July. We had thought it would be here sooner. We kind of expressed our concerns to Weston and Sampson of, we need this thing, we need answers, not more questions.
But yeah, I think it's kind of a long-term
Yeah, it's a
conversation.
long-term
But this report
conversation.
will be a good
Yeah.
baseline to
Yep.
start. But
Exactly.
I am curious, my other comment under the sewer capacity was collaboration with the surrounding towns, because I
Nobody
always
wants-
feel like that should be part of the conversation, but I know it's tricky. And I don't know
Yeah.
about NEMCOG, like what is NEMCOG, what kind of conversation does NEMCOG have about the sewer stuff?
I mean, she's
For
had
the
conversations
town, I
with the managers. The problem is, nobody wants to give up their capacity, and we've
Yeah.
explored this. Billerica has capacity, but they're not 100% sewered. Tewksbury has capacity, but they're not 100% sewered, but their plan is to increase the sewerization in their communities.
Yeah.
And they sort of they don't want to be in the situation that we're in. And then
Yeah.
Drake is at capacity, and that's why they've explored, solutions out through Methuen. And then the same thing with Tingsboro. Tingsboro looks towards, which side of the river to go to the plant, but also looks towards Nashua as solutions because, it's part of the, as you said, but there's.
Just feel like everyone's kinda doing
and then
their
the
own
And then the
thing, I
problem
know.
is nobody, if we had even looked, because we looked at this so many years about, well, couldn't we go into with a regional plant that would serve like Westford, Tingsboro, and Chelmsford?
Yeah.
The problem is, where do you put it? Because nobody wants it in their neighborhood. And the state and the federal government no longer allow you to put it on a water body like the Merrimack River. So a place like Southwell, which was originally envisioned for that, you can't do anymore. And then, you hear people complain, we know from the experience in the city of Lowell, the complaints they have from the odor at their sewage treatment plant at Duck Island, as well as the trucks. Now, that's obviously a busy commercial road, 110 in Lowell, as you go to the Lowell-Dracut line. But you can imagine the pushback you get if you were running septic and commercial trucks to a sewage treatment plant
Yeah.
in any neighborhood, in any town. And so between the odor and the disruption of traffic and otherwise, that's why you just don't see these things being built. And again, the problem with the Lowell plant is they physically don't have expansion capacity. And obviously with Lowell's growth, if there is some capacity, Lowell's not obligated to offer it to the communities. And with their growth, they're likely not going to.
Yeah. They're going to need it.
They're going to need it for themselves. And rightfully, if they own the plant and they're a city of 120,000 people, that's growing, they're going to, if you were in their seats, you would do the same thing. You'd save it for yourself.
So we're not here to solve the problem.
No, but I
tonight.
just didn't know if you had any
We're
other
just to
thoughts.
put it
to be
on a
honest.
list.
Yeah, I guess it's on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the
That's
only
on the
the only
list.
thing that I would kind of add to that under the sewer capacity resolution is, I don't know, maybe looking into collaboration with the surrounding towns. But again, I think that getting this report back is a good, that's the first step. And then we can see where we are, and I don't know what that collaboration looks like anyways. I'm not sure how I would put that into words on here. And I know NEMCOG is kind of doing some of that work too, so. I don't
So
know.
if I may, just to mimic some of the FY25 goals, just starting right at the beginning of the report, I think some of these items should stay on as goals for the following year, being, if we start with the first one, the fiscal management and visibility, early notification of financial issues, mostly based on the times that we're living in and what we think may and will likely come before us over the next year. I think it's important to leave early notification of financial issues on. I think fee structure evaluation, which Paul indicated that it's constantly reviewed, and I think that's another one that as we get into some more of this perilous times that we constantly go back and take a look at that, because revenues are going to become an important discussion topic, as well as again, under fiscal management and visibility, any grant opportunities that may arise and legislative funding opportunities, I think that should stay on as well. Not ready to reconsider marijuana, but maybe next year we will. But I think an update, maybe mid-year, Paul, to just again look at more recent fiscal year revenues that maybe some of the towns around us um, um, have received by allowing that in their towns, which is always usually in industrial areas and such, and so not something that would ever be in the town center or anything like that. But I think it's too early to reconsider that again. But I think we should maybe report on what some of these other towns that directly abut us, and I think almost every town that does abut Chelmsford allows it. So I think we're leaving money on the table on that. Collective bargaining, we're moving through now. Any process improvements going forward, I think, are important to help just manage the town a little bit better. So sewer, stormwater drainage is an ongoing thing as well. So I see many of these as, staying on our goals for coming forward. Infrastructure you touched on in the way of sidewalks and preparing for that. So I see that staying as well. Town government focus areas, I think, is a good heading to cover. Again, the 54 Richardson Road situation, I think, should stay on there. The Warren Pole conservation restriction, as well as now, one of my items separate from all this was to monitor and support the CR for coolest that I understand, we need to, move through surveys and things like that prior to doing that. But I think that should stay on and be added to for coolest. Traffic certainly is an ongoing problem in the town, and we've recently heard from folks in town of some traffic issues here at our meetings, so I think that should stay on and be monitored as well. That under the town government focus areas, strategic plan is going to obviously be on our radar, and then board and committee initiatives just ongoing. I think that should stay on in as much as the permanent building committee's work regarding the fire stations and some of the other items, open space and recreation, and clean energy and sustainability. And board and committee initiatives should stay on as well as we work through what we need to work through with the ADUs, 40B safe havens, and the MSBA school project. So those are all things that I see staying on for the next year. Volunteer appreciation should be ongoing as well. And policy updates and charter updates should probably stay as well. Other than that, and I think I've mentioned this to the board before when we were talking about MWRA sewer, I think we should, and I think we're doing this at some point, but I think we should look at possibly tying into MWRA water at some point, because I'm just not sure that the town well system is going to be able to sustain and provide good drinking water in the future here in Chelmsford. So I think it's something that we should be looking at now, just ahead of time. Not just looking at MWRA sewer. And I know, again, we talked about this at some point in the past few months, but I'd like to add the water to that. And I believe we're going to, get some kind of report on that later on. And then to some of the items in your list, Paul, I think, and one of the things that was on my list was water department consolidation, just because of all the problems that each department seems to be having at this point. And I think water needs to become much more of a visible issue town-wide. So I think, that will encompass, probably MWRA water, water department consolidation, et cetera. And then, again, to your point, explore revenue options, anything that we can do to increase revenues for the town in this time that we're going to need them, I think we should be doing. So that's what I have this evening.
Anything, Jeff?
On the Ledge Road thing, I was lucky enough to attend a fundraiser for Rodney Elliott last week, and Virginia, former select board member, Virginia Crockett Timmons was there as well. Rodney was appreciative to see a Chelmsford contingency, and he brought up Ledge Road to me. I didn't bring it up. He asked if I was going to be going to the meetings. I said, that's not my liaison. I said, but if it's beneficial that I attend, I said, I'll be happy to. But it's showing me the state's keeping an eye on Ledge Road as well, which is a good news as far as I'm concerned.
So Pat went through a lot of the things, so I actually took last year's select board list and town manager list and went through and said, these are the things I definitely want to see again. And then I took a look at the strategic plan, which, I assumed would be implementing, and tried to lay a few things out. That the thing that I'm kind of happy to report on is that I think a lot of the things that Pat just mentioned, I agree they're probably staples for a while now that we continue to do and monitor and report on, because I think keeping up with a lot of those things is really important. And I do appreciate what Paul laid out here in a little bit more detail than I was thinking about it. Because I kind of look at the top of the list here, and it's the budget, it's the sewer. I wasn't considering the water, but that's come up on more than one conversation. The school, completing the fire stations, and then kind of implementing the strategic plan, because we are dealing with the today problems and the next year budget problems, but we can't take our eye off of that long-term ball, which is why, making sure that we implement the strategic plan and get it going, and modifying where we need to as the future evolves, is pretty important. And so I think kind of everything that we've covered now, I'd like to take some notes back and kind of reorganize them. But the one thing that I want to figure out a way to incorporate, and I'm not sure I'm quite seeing it yet, is that, and maybe it does, maybe it's under the kind of the revenue option idea, is just business development. So we talked about it tonight. I think it's important if we have property owners or businesses that want to come in and they can't expand, or if a property owner has something, they want to do something different with the property, if we don't have the zoning, or it gets rejected by town meeting or the planning board, I think ensuring that people know that the town is actively working business development issues, because that is additional revenue. I mean, we have revenue today, but it's arguably or potentially incremental revenue, and I rather put something in that we could kind of live with, that not everybody loves, than turn around and say, okay, we have to, let go of somebody from the DPW so no potholes get filled this year. Like, those are the conversations I think we just have to be honest with each other about having. So incorporating some sort of periodic business development update. And again, I'm sure some of that, happens because Evan sits on the planning board, but I feel like we ought to be reporting out if a business said, okay, I can't do business here, or I'd like to do business here, but I can't fit within the boundaries that you've had. And I'm not saying we change anything, but if people don't understand what we're losing, then they're not going to be able to be informed when they have to make a town meeting vote, or if the planning board has to make a vote. So I think that's, other than that, all the things mentioned and what's on your list, I think just organize it a little bit more for me, and kind of, I don't want you to report out on 27 things every quarter, because I don't want it to get lost in the details. So I want to make sure that we cover the bigger topics with that. So that's all I got.
Okay, so I'll give my input then. Yeah, I agree that, some of the things on the current year need to stay, but there are some obviously that can be removed that we finished. And I don't know, I guess it's a philosophical thing about how long we want our goals to be. I mean, some of those things are just automatic, that they're going to be covered anyway, whether they're on our goals or not. So I don't know how we, we had the tier 1 and tier 2 at one point, but I don't know if that really works. But anyway, it might be something to look at later. But I do have one, a question on your list, under cost efficiency, no, under revenue options, you have regional public safety dispatch. Do you mean to put that there?
Yeah.
How do you figure that a revenue option? I would have put it
well,
under
if we-
cost efficiency.
If we were the provider of the regional dispatch, we'd receive revenue from another community.
Oh, okay.
So let's say we were to regionalize dispatch for Tingsboro. And again, I'm not
Okay.
we haven't had a discussion with Tingsboro,
Right.
but obviously if that were the case, then just like we provide the animal control services for Tingsboro, they provide us, with a payment every month for providing the animal control officer. So if we were providing the dispatch, so let's say it costs Tingsboro X to provide their own dispatch, and it's costing us Y, then if we were to take on a regional role, you'd get some state money, so that's revenue, but then also you'd get some money from the town of Tingsboro. Unless it were a regional rec, then it would be a separate government entity. You're right, it'd be outside of us.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. You got to look at the model, but you could see how, if it was costing Tingsboro X to do dispatch, costing us Y, and it's going to cost Z to do combined, and therefore our net cost would be lower and their net cost would be lower. Revenue would come in to us from
Sure.
Tingsboro
Okay,
to do it.
yeah.
That's why I threw it as a revenue
Right.
option.
Okay.
It would be a budgetary savings if we left and said, oh,
Right.
we're going to go join.
And I thought that would
We're
be a
going to
more
join the
logical thing.
dispatch in Tewksbury that's
Yep.
doing Drake at Tewksbury,
Okay.
and they were going to do Chelmsford.
Okay.
Then that would be right. So that's
would be a
why I left it
savings.
there,
Okay.
because I guess I was just
I
being
guess you could
conscious.
put it in either one.
You could be either one, but the problem is, no matter what you put it on, you're going to get somebody's hackles up. So it's just
Okay,
like,
well,
what do
kind
we
of,
do?
kind of on that topic then, I wrote down like the weights and measures, as we're kind of ramping up to do a regional thing on that.
Yeah, we're actually operating right now. yeah.
Is there a possibility that could be expanded for more revenue options? I mean,
Well,
I know it's hard.
NIMCOG failed.
I know they
and so
did, but.
I don't want to bite off more than we could chew, but the reason we're doing it with Westford and Tewksbury, because between the three of them, one person can do it. I guess you're right. We could look, well, what if we took on, other communities, then we'd have to add staff and everything. I guess we could look at it, but I guess I'm sort of a little bit gun shy, because if NIMCOG wasn't able to do it,
Sure.
was I going to say, oh, well,
Well, it's new too, so you might want
well,
to
but
see
no,
how
but
it
NIMCOG was
goes and
doing
then
it for
see if
years.
there's capacity
But-
to
but-
add.
Right, but I want to make sure it works for us, but NIMCOG was doing it for years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And obviously
And
there was a
it's a
change of
need.
administration. There may have been a change of philosophy, to be
yeah.
honest. But, so yeah, I didn't want to bite off more than we could chew and say, hey, NIMCOG, I can do it if you can't, and then, kind of, and then fall flat on our face and have us deal with the economic fallout
Well,
of that.
yeah, I guess the point being, there might be other opportunities like that too. I mean, it's good that we're looking
Yeah.
at other things where we can regionalize and be the, I guess, even that grant that we're doing with Billerica, where we're the host community, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, the money is coming to us, not that we're going to make any
Right.
profit from that or anything like that, but when that finishes up, perhaps we could look at doing some kind of,
Yeah.
regional advocacy that would include more than just Billerica, and
Yeah.
and have some kind of charge for them or
Yeah,
something
and
like that.
we do, as you may, I don't know how well the director reports to the NIMCOG board, but we do have these discussions monthly at the NIMCOG managers meetings, where we talk about, particularly the smaller towns out, the Pepperell and the Dunstables, they're always looking to regionalize, and they do it more effectively because they're at the size and scale they have to.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we'll keep looking at it, but yeah, we'll keep doing that.
Okay. I mean, some of the things that I was thinking that, I've been kind of focused on policy stuff for a while, and there's a few more policy things I think maybe that we could look at, or, so, I could take a first crack at them. Since we have a policy now for appointment for town council and town manager, we should have one for town accountant, because we're also responsible for hiring a town accountant. So that one should be a little bit easier to do because it's a more traditional hire. So anyway, so I was going to maybe take a crack at that, and we could put that on our goals. I think we've looked at the minutes that we have in our policy, the minutes policy, that seems kind of cumbersome to me, and I think others have commented the same thing, that it's not the most straightforward, easy to follow, logical process. So maybe to take a look at that again. And there might be some other policies that need updating. I know there's some things in our policies that maybe we never do, and maybe if we never do them, we should take them out, because they're not necessary. On the volunteer stuff and resident engagement, I was approached by a couple of members of one of the committees in town, asking if we had like a best practices manual for committees, and I thought, we don't, but that's an excellent idea. And these committee members offered to work with me to come up with one, but we could put that on our goals and maybe, do some more outreach, maybe form a committee on that, but maybe just make it be a informal work group that we collect ideas. And that might involve, I watched a webinar a few weeks ago that MMA did, where a lot of communities are doing these civic academies. And I know a while ago they used to do them all, MMA used to always brag about them. And I thought, well, who would go to one of those things? Basically, residents would have to commit to, say, 10 or 12 weeks, one day a week, to go to a meeting where they would learn about the different departments in the town. The public safety would have one night, the DPW would have another one, the schools would have another one. And then at the end of the 12-week or 10-week period, the students would get there'd be a graduation. They'd get a certificate of having completed going through this process, and supposedly it increases participation. The people that usually would attend these, and usually it's not a big group, maybe 15 to 20 people at most, they're more likely to then be more engaged in committees in town and tell their friends and neighbors about all the wonderful things that the town does to get them more engaged. Maybe it's something we could try to get more people involved, so we have even less people on our list of committee vacancies. I mean, it is looking good right now, but probably at the end of next month, it's going to grow a little bit, right? As
It
people,
looks so good right now, though. I've
Yeah.
never seen it so short. It's, yeah.
right. So that's, a couple of things. And then something that came up from town meeting, the evaluating the options for the pet cemetery. I think we need to do that and just, decide if we can do that, if we can't do that, why we can, why we can't, and just to put it to rest so that we don't have people constantly coming back and saying, we have to do this, we can do this, I know we can do this, but not everybody knows we can do this. So I don't know how we do that, if it's a one-person thing or how that.
Yeah, that should definitely be on here, though. We're
Yes.
literally tasked with it per
Yes,
town meeting, so
right,
yeah, that's
right.
going to be
So
on here.
I think that needs to be a report, by maybe the end of this calendar year, no later than Springtown meeting, a year, less than a year from now.
Yeah.
So, Pat, just a quick question on
Sure.
the committee book. Are you thinking that different than what the clerk's office put together?
Yeah, because that's more formal, that's open meeting law, that's,
Right.
that has to do with minutes, that has to do, but this would be more like how to get people more engaged.
Okay,
I mean, like one thing, I know there's probably, the Civic Academy being one option, and some committees, and I don't know, I think this really works well, they keep a list of people that are interested in the committee but not interested enough to join it. And they're basically called the friends of the recycling committee or something like that. And then the recycling committee once a month will send out a newsletter to everybody that's on their email list about what they're doing, and if they need help for hazardous waste day or something, they'll ask for volunteers to do that. And I think that's a way to get people more engaged, more involved, so they get a sense for what's going on, but without the commitment of coming to a meeting if they're not ready. Maybe it's reaching out maybe more to the schools. I mean, I know some committees have student representatives on their committees, and that seems to help get people engaged at the beginning. I mean, library trustees is a guy that's been on library trustees since he was an elected member, since I think he was a senior in high school, and now he's finishing up college, so he's finishing basically his second term on the library, and that's where he got started, was, coming to the meetings and seeing what it's all about. I think, I think we need to get, been saying this forever, we need to get younger folks involved. We need to start, reaching out to them early and getting them hooked on something that they can do for the community, Ask not what Chelmsford can do for you, ask what you can do for Chelmsford, to paraphrase somebody. So anyway, that's my thoughts. And yeah, I definitely agree with the other items that have been brought up.
Does anybody else?
Yeah, I got a couple of quick things.
Sure, go ahead.
Paul, as you know, I was contacted by somebody at the high school who wanted to learn more about traffic. He's gonna do a civics report in his class, which, I mean, that's a great, to dovetail what you were saying, you know, get a student to get together with that the traffic committee. I mean, I didn't even realize, I mean, I wouldn't just put it right off to them immediately, because they look at that stuff much more than we do, I'm sure. By the same token, coming out of town meeting, I had a lot of business people ask me what happened to the lighting article, and I explained that, you know, Kelly didn't feel it was completely the way he would like to see it, so they decided to roll it back. And out of those conversations, somebody brought up, well, what about the sign advisory committee? I said, we haven't had one for years. And so the thought was, well, if we had that committee, that would help new businesses. They could help me understand what they can and can't do with signage. Instead of having them design something, come to the town, and the town say, nope, doesn't work. So that was one suggestion that came to me, was do we consider bringing back the sign advisory committee?
We do have some stuff in our zoning bylaws, though, around signage, I
We do.
believe. So
Yes,
we
yeah.
do have some guidelines in zoning that they have to meet.
Yeah, and that's a building commissioner.
Yeah, and if there's if they request the variance, they go to the Board of Appeals.
Right.
Yeah.
And the sign advisory committee statutorily
Didn't do much.
was an advisory committee to the Board of Appeals. And that's why they went defunct, is because there was never anything for them to do.
Because the building inspector pretty much.
Well,
does
yeah, and they
Yeah.
weren't coming to, it wasn't meant to be an advisory committee to businesses. Not saying it shouldn't be, but I'm saying
Oh,
that's what it was.
okay.
Their statutory, in the bylaw, was advisory committee to the Board of Appeals. And, you know, Fran McDougal used to joke that she was on it, but they never met, because it was never an application for them to consider. And then also at the time, that was when the town wasn't allowing the sandwich board signs and other stuff, and then the town ended up modifying the bylaws to allow the sandwich board signs. Now, because that was, as you know, remember how that was really contentious as people were putting those out, and now that's been relaxed. So again, we can give it some thought.
That's it.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? I don't have much, except for the, like I mentioned, the collaboration around the sewer and water conversation. The only other thing that I had, which is probably a much bigger conversation than anyone wants to get into, but I think, Paul, you and I recently had a conversation about Parks and Rec, and you know, we don't have a Parks and Rec department in town,
And people, the Park and Rec discussion comes up under field maintenance.
Yes.
That's not what a recreation department does, and
Yes.
it's not what the recreation department, when Holly Mansfield was here, was doing.
Yeah.
And so it's a red herring that's been put out by people
Yeah.
who just want to take shots for
Well, so
whatever reason they want to do.
It comes
but-
up for me because
Right,
I
but-
have children that I want
Right.
to put in summer camp, and that's where it comes
but
up
that's
for
a
me. I'm
recrea-
like looking
but
for
that's a
summer camps, and I'm like, why don't we have
that's
a
a
Parks and Rec?
recreation program. But the
Yes,
idea
yes,
that
it's
a Parks and
program.
Recreation Department was going to manage conservation land,
Yeah,
first of
no.
all, it's not statutorily allowed.
No, that's
because
not what
only
I'm
conservation can
suggesting.
do it. But and so I think it might be the better question was recreation department.
Yeah.
And the problem with it is funding, quite frankly.
Yes.
It went defunct
You create
under
positions.
myself and Don Yeoman, who was at that time the superintendent of schools, and because they got absorbed into community ed, and they couldn't make it viable either.
Well, that's kind of my question. Does it have to, or could it
Doesn't
be?
have
I
to
mean,
be.
could it be a department?
But the-
Could it be absorbed into the DPW, or because I know the DPW is really
But what are they
doing
going
a
to
lot of
offer?
work, or-
Because it's in the situation, the reality in Chelmsford is you have Chelmsford Youth Softball, you have
Yeah.
Chelmsford Youth Baseball, you have the lacrosse programs, you have, CYBL, the basketball program. And so that have become the defunct.
it would go under an umbrella.
recreation. So,
of them.
so if unless you're going to pull those organizations apart and put them into a recreation department, which they're not going to want, because we see what happens is when you try to step on the toes of volunteers, very recently, with the open space management of conservation lands, what would a recreation department offer? Because what Holly was doing and why that went financially tanked is those were the little summer programs, after school programs
Yeah.
and so forth. And they didn't get enough enrollment. And then the original vision of the North Town Hall was to be a community center.
Yeah.
Remember, that was the vision. It was called the Chelmsford Community Center, and they were going to have after school programs and so forth. People idealize about it, but when it comes to taking out the checkbook or the debit card or the electronic payment and paying it, it just never materialized.
Or driving the kid to the
Or driving the
activity.
kid there and everything else, and the sad part is I just think it's we just don't see it existing with today's kids because it's just different. We all know it. It's different being a teenager or a young adult or an older child today than it was 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, and so you just don't see the program. I'm not saying it can't happen. We can look at it, but I just don't see how we'll do it because you not only got to pay for the programs, now you're going to have to pay for somebody to administer the programs.
Well, yeah, and that's what we talked about, whether it would be,
Yeah.
you'd have to create a
You're gonna create
position
a
with the
position
town,
for
which
that?
is then you're creating a head count.
I mean, yeah, you just saw this fellow here on Summer Street who just relocated because he couldn't stay in town. He was running the trolls and the program, and everything else.
Oh, the
and then
games,
and
the
then you also saw the one on Summer Street that was doing the coding. They just it's just not there. Meaning there doesn't seem to be economic viability for those programs.
Yeah, I mean, as a parent of young kids in town, I'll tell you that there's programs.
Yeah.
They're everywhere,
Yeah.
but they're also scattered, right? So you have volunteers running, like my daughter's softball league. You have volunteers running the lacrosse, all the different sporting things, all the different programs.
You have that I-9 program.
But it
I'm
makes
sorry.
it complicated. And even for them, for the people who are running the programs, I think it's complicated because they're all kind of operating separately, and then they have to vie for field time, and it's not under any umbrella. And
Yeah, I
then,
mean, it would be great if there was like a coalition of them, so they had the same registration system, so that you as a parent didn't have to
if
register.
all the different
all the
sports teams.
I get it. Yeah.
Sure, but that would require, right, like some sort of like umbrella
Yeah.
to oversee all of that. And I don't know. I just recently, after with all the conversation about increasing accessibility to the town's open spaces and things like that, and then my recent camp experience, camp hunt experience, I had a conversation with the guy who runs the camp program in Billerica for their Parks and Rec, and their program is insane. They offered 50 million camps, and I was like, tell me how, tell me all the things. How are you doing this? And it's incredibly affordable. I mean, I can't find anything else like it anywhere, So it makes me wonder if, and we're growing, and I don't know if that's something that in collaboration with our conversations about how we utilize our open spaces,
Why wouldn't it be a regional program?
and with the DPW, I mean, maybe,
Yeah,
can
maybe
we
that's the
get
thing.
Billerica
Yeah.
to combine theirs
Yeah,
with us? I
exactly,
don't know.
yeah.
I mean, but that's just something that I kind of, when we talk about our utilizing the open spaces, and we talk about, childcare for the families in town and things like that, and it occurs to me that, I don't know, at some point we might get to a point, whether it's as a size of the town or whatever,
Yeah,
where something like that
Yeah, we're
might
30
make sense, or having a conversation about kind of consolidating some, and maybe it's a conversation with the DPW because it's kind of in line with a lot of the work that I think they do also. I don't know. Or the, I don't know.
Well, facilities took over a lot of the maintenance on those properties, correct?
On which properties?
The activities, the fields and stuff like that.
Yeah, they work with with some of the volunteers and that, because part of the other problem is some of these volunteer organizations are struggling to get the next generation of members,
Yes.
who go out there and do the work as well. I mean, that's the
And it's unorganized. That's
Right,
the thing. I love
exactly.
it. I mean, I love the programs that my kids do, but it's that they don't have the structure, right, to do so. It's
But I think that's what I'm hearing. It's not that with the services, you didn't say the services weren't there. It's just there's not one place to go. And because they're all independently
yeah.
kind of operated regardless of how, you're right, because I've run into the battle of like over at the PAC being scheduled twice, or you gotta do this over at the McCarthy. You gotta, so there even with the stuff that we do control, there seems to be a little bit of.
And they're all
of
vying
chaos,
for
confusion.
field time and all of these
But-
things, but there's nobody kind of, yeah.
But I think that if I heard everything that was said, it's not about where it goes, it's about getting it's more about, kind of find a way to get them all, as I think your word used, under one umbrella. And so I don't necessarily think that's like an employee that the town would put on. I think that's, I'd want to look at a different solution to that versus hiring somebody to be the coordinator, but I don't know, maybe that is the solution, and if there's a way to make that kind of cost neutral, then. might
Yeah,
be
I don't know if it's a
interesting to
Parks,
explore.
I don't know if it's necessarily a Parks and Rec, or if it's something under the DPW as a recreation. I don't know. I just think when we talk about increasing accessibility to open space lands, right, which is on here, and we talk about kind of using the spaces that we have to enrich the lives of people in town, I think there's some opportunity there. Yeah. Just a thought. I'm not even sure how I would bullet that on this priority list, but, and I don't know how a traditional Parks and Rec department operates and, the details of that, so. I don't know. Maybe it's an offline conversation, but I don't know.
All right, so we'll
I
come
think it's
back.
worth talking about.
So we can come back with a revised outline of a list for the board to look at in 2 weeks of the goals based on the conversation we've had tonight.
Are we back in 2 weeks? 1 week or 2
Yeah,
weeks?
2 weeks,
2
June
weeks, right?
2nd.
Yeah, next week's a
Like
parade,
it's been every week.
Next Monday, you'll be in the parade, Memorial Day,
maybe.
maybe, yeah. Hoping the weather
So
works
you're
out.
gonna do that?
Yeah, I'll do that, and I can share with you if you bet, and just
Okay,
come back with something.
okay.
What I'll do is I'll use the outline of the current one as
Mm-hmm.
the template, and then just build on it, and then pull some things out, as you said, and I can run it by you before I send it out.
That sounds good. Okay, if nobody has anything else on the goals, okay, we'll come back to it in a couple of weeks. And with that, it looks like we don't have anything else.
Yeah, we
Just
did.
liaison reports and referrals.
Oh,
It's in
liaison,
there.
oh, yeah, sorry, I
that
saw
was-
it, and I said
it
to
was-
James, I said, is this
it was-
back? I said,
yeah.
why, it's not always like this, it's backwards, right? Okay,
Yeah,
so
we're not coming
sorry.
back to do liaison report.
Yes, no, we're not coming back to do liaison reports. So it is time for liaison reports and referrals. We'll just go through those. Pat, do you have a report you'd like to
Yeah, I
do?
just have a couple of things. First of all, the library is pleased to announce that beginning on Wednesday, June 4th, McKay Library in North Chelmsford will be open on Wednesdays from 12:30 to 8:30, really expanding their hours on Wednesday. They're still going to be open also on Mondays and Fridays, but expanding their hours on Wednesday. So that's a good thing for them. And just wanted a note that I noticed that there was a gentleman who used to be a veterans agent in the town of Chelmsford. His name is Kevin Cody, who passed away recently doing some research. Paul helped me with the research. He was a veterans agent in town in the early 90s. So, I didn't know him myself, but I'm sure there are people that did know him and worked with him in the veterans office. That's all I have.
Thank you, Pat. Pat Maloney?
Yeah, I just have a couple of quick things tonight. Paul, myself, Dr. Lang, and Dennis King, the chair of the school committee, met with MSBA last Monday, Mass School Building Authority last Monday, to get our owner's project manager approved. We received a letter a couple of days later with that approval, so contract has been executed with our OPM Left Field LLC. And very quickly after that, by Friday, the request for services for an architectural firm, the draft was submitted to the Mass School Building Authority for their review and comment and approval. So we'll be looking forward to getting that back, along with a few other caveats that we need to work through. But the OPM is official, and they are on board and under contract, and we're starting right off on getting the architect request for services out, and that'll be our next order of business, and hope to have an architect on board and approved by MSBA by the end of the summer. I think we were slated for later on in August for our final meeting with MSBA regarding that. So, and that's all I have tonight.
Jeff?
Yeah, I got a little bit of a lengthy report from the parade committee. I'll try to make it quick. Many of the members of the committee started in 2006. Several have decided to leave after next year. It'll be 20 years for many of us. So it's time for some new citizens to step up and continue our wonderful tradition. Currently, we have our town liaisons, Town Manager Cohen, Select Board Member Wojcik, and myself, and the committee members include Candy and Sam Chase, Paige Gillette, Sean Hanaway, Nick Hood, myself, Eric Lindstead, Chuck and Lynn Marcella, Kirk Marshall, R.J. McGowan, Karen Reedy, and Rick Romano. We also would like to thank the Chelmsford Police for all their assistance with the permits, traffic issues, road closures, security, etc. In particular, Lieutenant Poor and Chief Spence, who have been working with us for years. We also the Chelmsford Parade Committee would also like to thank the Department of Public Works for all their help with erecting the reviewing stand and camera stand, making sure the lawns are all cut and beautiful in the center for the parade, and helping with road closures. The parade committee used to hang all the banners in town, and because we've kind of aged out, we've been fortunate that DPW has stepped up and helped us out with that. So now we have them not just in the center, but in Bonner Square and Drum Hill as well. Thankfully, DPW does have a bucket truck, and they make sure it's done safely, as opposed to the way they used to do it. Thanks to telemedia for all their work to broadcast the parade live and also show the parade programs from past years, which hopefully will get everyone in the mood to participate. We could not do this without these outstanding town departments. We are still accepting applications from businesses and families who may like to participate in the parade or sponsor a banner. Thanks to all who have already done so. Their generosity helps us pay for the events on the 4th and a little bit with the country fair, which the Lions basically oversee. And then the 3rd, you have the art show at the CCA. And then the parade concert on the Common featuring country star Jilly Martin and her band. Jilly is a very talented hometown girl. July 4th, we'll have the road race, obviously, sponsored by Sullivan Farms, which has brought in over 2,000 runners. We'll have the Lions Club Country Fair, which I already mentioned, the Art Society show, which I mentioned, then the annual parade on July 4th. And congratulations to our parade marshal, George Dixon Jr. There is also a parade float competition, and I want people to pay attention. Again, this year we're encouraging clubs, neighborhoods, families, friends to consider entering a float in our contest. We did not have many last year, and we want to encourage this and make the parade more fun than ever. The prize money will be as follows. First place will receive $1,500. Second place will receive $1,000. Third place will receive $500. And then we'll have 3 honorable mentions of $100 apiece. Next year will be a big celebration for our country. In 1776, the Continental Congress voted for independence from Great Britain on July 2nd and adopted the Declaration of Independence, formally declaring the 13 American colonies as sovereign states on July 4th. That was 250 years ago. That's definitely something to celebrate. If you can't do a float this year, please consider planning ahead for next year. And that's it. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got 2, and my apologies to the boards that I didn't reach out to in time to see if there was anything they wanted me to bring up. But I attended my first Council on Aging meeting in person, and met with Debbie and Bob and the rest of the staff there at the senior center. They are a very busy group. I don't know how many other people realize that. I had no idea. They're active. They're working with, they're getting all kinds of programming put into place. And I think, Debbie does a good job with that. One of the things that came up in this particular meeting was that the Friends of the Senior Center is losing some board members, and there's an application and an interview process, and I guess it's pretty lengthy, but there's some concern there that they need to fill some board seats. So if there are people that are interested, they should look them up. The Senior Center gets a lot of funding from them for a lot of their programming, so that funding source is important to ensuring that Deb can still do a lot of the things that she does. The other thing, and they asked me to not share a whole lot of details yet because it's not ready for prime time, but they've worked very diligently on a strategic plan. I've seen it. It's pretty interesting. I think they've done a lot of good work there. So there'll be more to come there. And then Bob indicated that they've got some quotes coming for the potential paneling and primarily in the senior center hall where we have town meeting. So there'll be more to come on that. They only meet once a month, but I'll check with them before each meeting going forward. The other assignment that I have that we recently had a meeting was for the planning board, and on the meeting agenda was the strategic plan and the managed growth strategy that we've asked the planning board to take on. So there's definitely, I know, Paul, that Chris has reached out, wants to get a meeting together with you, myself, and Evan to kind of go over and make sure that the planning board understands the language and the idea behind asking them, to do this. So, directly, he was pretty blunt that, we need to align on what that terminology means. When Chris thinks about it, he thinks about, being controlling and limiting and not, I'm paraphrasing here, and not necessarily encouraging growth, which is where his gut says that he thinks that managed growth term comes from. So there's definitely some discussion to have there, and why I think this is important is that that they kind of look at the planning board and zoning as not encouraging growth or expansion, but limiting and controlling and setting minimum standards. So I think, and I knew this was going to happen when we were doing this in the strategic plan, that this idea of growth, there's going to be conflicts in sorting it out. But I've started to do some of the research in anticipation of this, and I do think planning boards play a role in encouraging economic growth. In fact, it's in the Mass General laws that's part of their charter. And I looked at our charter and I understand what they're delegated to do for the town of Chelmsford. So I think getting that meeting together sooner so that we can clarify where we think that needs to go or decide where we think that needs to go, and then get working on it. Because again, I look at that as opportunities for ways for us to work with the planning board and Evan and the rest of the crowd to encourage the right kind of development, and the right kind of redevelopment. So I definitely want to make sure that we're getting that on the books as soon as practical for the three of us.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to go beyond the three of us, because that was the crux. As you know, Aaron, you were on the planning board,
Yep.
and it sort of goes to our early discussion tonight on goals. The strategic plan steering committee realized that they couldn't resolve the issue of what does the town want in terms of growth going forward. And here we are talking about sewer capacity. Well, that's growth. And that was why that goal came into the into the strategic plan, and it was sort of input that came from some department heads as well as the community in terms of what does the town want to do, and clearly this current planning board, as we saw at recent town meeting, and recently you're right, they tend to want to constrain growth or not encourage growth, and that wasn't always the case. I know it hasn't always been the case in the 18 years that I've been here. And that's really something that we've got to get our hands around, because as Pat Maloney talked earlier when he was talking about what we need, if we're going to be able to survive and sustain as a community and encourage communities to remain in town or to grow in town, Well, you can't have that if the reputation of your planning board, which it currently exists in the Middlesex 3 corridor, is anti-growth. And that's, and so the problem is it's not, oftentimes you're not even going to know that you were bypassed because they're not going to come to your door to begin with. And I think this may end up being a fundamental discussion in the year ahead, because we're just seeing that in terms of what's out there. Is you will never know who didn't come knocking on your door because they've driven right by your community. And right now, the reputation that the town has from the developments that and frustration that didn't occur, whether it was right or wrong, in terms of Riverneck Road, their old Mercury computer site, 129, the most recent one being the proposal for the drive-throughs. That owner was disappointed. And now you see even the concern at 300 Billerica Road, where we thought we were going to have this innovative business community. Now, as I formed the board last week, they've now changed their plan based upon what they told Evan, our community development director, was based upon their interaction with the planning board, is they're coming back with this facility instead, instead of what their original vision was, because they felt that the planning board can never find a project that's good enough. And I think that's sort of been the concern. And I think, again, not to monopolize your liaison report, but I think that's something that is paramount. And I think we're going to feel the effects of that.
And so I appreciate all that, and I, with some of that, I agree because I've observed it. But, just so that people know where I came from, because I was, that was part of some of the contribution I had to that plan, is that it needs to be managed, because there are very real things like sewer capacity and water capacity and those types of things that are constraints. But when we're talking about managing growth, we don't want it to get out of control. We don't want it to be unsustainable, but we also can't, to your point, we can't say no to everything. And I kind of feel like the default is say no to everything. And the residents are very clear. They want the planning board to do exactly what the charter says to do, which is to kind of preserve the nature of Chelmsford as it is, recognizing their historical past. And I think what the residents say matters. I think what's important about this managed growth thing is it's educating the residents on that we can still have some of that, but without growth, we're not going to have anything. Without growth, we're going to start to degrade. Without new sources of revenue, we're not going to be able to level service fund anymore. We're not going to be able to attract businesses that may start to employ some people in this town. So it's, again, I can't stress enough how, for me and as a member of this board, I think that that's really important that those discussions happen, because I don't want to look at residents in the eye and say, okay, what sidewalk are we not going to repair this year? What potholes are we not going to fill? What teachers are we going to cut? What services are we not going to be able to provide anymore? Because you've been saying this now for years. Look at the budget projections. We're not been too far off. So, again, I don't mean to use this time right now to get passionate about it, but I think it's really important that we need to start finding a way forward. And I'm going to just start being honest with people and telling them, if you're going to say no to these things, if you're going to say no to incremental meals tax, if I get 10 of those, maybe that's somebody's job that we can level service fund. Otherwise, it's not going to be there. Now, I also don't think we need to be building up like Burlington either. That's not my suggestion. But these discussions need to start happening as soon as practical is my point. So, anyway, sorry for the tangent, but the planning board's very busy, and they got a lot of initiatives ahead of them. They're going to have a lot of articles on, or their plan is to have a fair number of zoning articles and updates, and their day-to-day work shouldn't get lost in my one statement here on that. So they're very busy, and like I said, we'll look forward to hearing some of their zoning articles, which again, the topics made sense to me the other day, so I look forward to hearing more on that. And again, my apologies to the other chairs for not reaching out for liaison updates.
Thank you. I was going to update a little bit on ZBA, but we talked about their safe harbor status earlier, and the Crosby Lane and Riverneck projects. being denied by the ZBA. The only other thing I wanted to mention about ZBA was that I think they still have the Ledge Road hearing coming up on June
Yep,
5th,
June 5th,
I believe.
yeah.
Right? Did they pick a location yet? I know that they were going to
Police station. community
They are
hall.
doing it at the police station in the police training room, right, on June 5th. So if anyone's interested in that, that will be going on. And that is all I have. So that concludes this part of our meeting. We do have an executive session for strategy with respect to litigation regarding the North Chelmsford Water District, regarding PFAS contamination, and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the following employee labor unions: Chelmsford Public Safety Dispatchers Association, the International Association of Firefighters, and the library employees. And I do have to declare that the meeting is being held in executive session because an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the town. And with that, I will take a motion.
Okay, quick side note, Paul, if you can send me a Zoom link to.
Yeah, I will. I'll send it to you and council. Yeah.
Okay, so I move that the board move to a executive session to discuss, as Erin said, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding North Chelmsford Water District, regarding PFAS contamination. Also to discuss strategy with respect to the collective bargaining with the following employee labor unions: Chelmsford Public Safety Dispatchers Association, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Council 93, International Association of Firefighters, Local 1839, and Library Employees, American Federation of Teachers, Local 3569, not to return.
Second the motion.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Pat Wojcik?
Yes.
Pat Maloney?
Aye.
Jeff?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
And I'm an aye. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.